What if I told you that many of the wonders and sights that you see around the country have their origin in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, the Christmas city, often also referred to as Steel City, USA. So why is that the case? And what was the impact of Bethlehem Steel, both globally and locally? Bruce J. Ward and Keith Sten from Historic Bethlehem Museum Sites join us to talk about the history of Bethlehem Steel and what we can know about it today. That's all coming up right here, right now. I'm Sam Chen, and this is Face the Issues. Good evening and welcome to Face the Issues. I'm Sam Chen. Many of the well-known landmarks across the United States can trace their roots to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and to Bethlehem Steel. So what was the impact of Bethlehem Steel, both globally and locally in Pennsylvania? We're joined tonight by Bruce J. Ward, who serves as a docent at Historic Bethlehem Museum Sites and is a former employee of Bethlehem Steel, and Keith Sten, the education coordinator at Historic Bethlehem Museum Sites. Gentlemen, welcome to Face the Issues. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for inviting us, Sam.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Let's start I want to talk about, begin Bethlehem Steel's global impact. Bethlehem Steel, I'm the child of immigrants. When my parents came to the United States, they had already known about Bethlehem. They learned about it in their textbooks, halfway around the world. Bethlehem Steel, let's just start there. What was Bethlehem Steel?
Bethlehem Steel was the third largest steel producer in the United States, and they built bridges, buildings, battleships, tankers, merchant ships, railroads. They built so many things across the nation that it's really hard to keep track of everything that they've done.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, just a brief timeline. 1857, it starts talking about the Iron Company first, and then Bethlehem Rolling Mill and the Iron Company. 1899, there's the Bethlehem Steel Company, and then in the 1900s, Bethlehem Steel Corporation. To your point, Bruce, I mean, just the laundry list of buildings that we see, the Chrysler Building, the Empire State Building, Waldorf Astoria in New York City, the Golden Gate Bridge, the Hoover Dam, Alcatraz, I think I read, was built with Bethlehem Steel. You think, we hear about Pittsburgh Steel, right? The Steelers, and you think a large city like Pittsburgh, okay. How did Bethlehem become such a huge part of this global steel industry?
Well, I think you have to go back to the turn of the century in Bethlehem. Charlie Schwab bought the steel company, and he immediately sold it to Andrew Carnegie of U.S. Steel, with a proviso that if he ever lost his job, he would be offered the opportunity to buy Bethlehem Steel back from U.S. Steel, and that actually happened. And I believe in 1902 or 1904, he contracted the Gray brothers to build the Gray mills in the Bethlehem plant of the Bethlehem Steel. And from 1908, when the Gray mills were completed, they were pushing out steel I-beams.
Okay.
Now, Sam, before that point, you could not build a structure more than 8-10 stories high with what they called cast iron beams, because they could not take the stress and strain of a high building. So in 1910, from 1910 to 1975, approximately 85% of the skyline of New York City came out of the Bethlehem plant.
Wow.
So that's a lot of buildings, and that's a lot of steel.
Yeah.
And of course, you have to look at the roadways and the bridges and everything, and all the infrastructure that is included in that. So it was monumental. It was huge.
Was Bethlehem Steel, did they come up with the idea of the I-beam? Were they the first to do it?
Well, they were the first to do it out of steel.
Okay.
They were making I-beams out of iron,
Sure.
but they had a tendency to crack, break out. If you had a poor quality of materials going in, you might get some porous iron, and then that would be subject to a severe deflector, so that wouldn't work. So when they started making beams out of steel, then they could go up. Then they could go up 10 stories, 20 stories, 50 stories, 100 stories. And that was unheard of at the time. So,
New York City skyline, you mentioned this earlier, Bruce, and we said Chrysler Building, Empire State Building, Madison Square Garden, Rockefeller Center, the Waldorf. It's safe to say the New York City skyline was changed because of Bethlehem Steel?
absolutely, because you have to look at the close proximity of the Bethlehem plant and New York City. I mean, you could just truck your stuff there. I mean, we were a landlocked plant, so that kind of inhibited us in a lot of ways, but not as far as getting the steel to New York City to build these structures and bridges and whatnot.
Yeah. One of the things that you had mentioned this earlier about World War II, and they built a lot of ships and a lot of military goods during the war. Bethlehem Steel impacted the Civil War, but World War II is probably the big one that they impacted. 1,100 ships in World War II were built with Bethlehem Steel. Between Bethlehem Steel and the steel out in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania supplied well over half the nation's steel during the war. Again, why Bethlehem? But also, can you just kind of set for us the impact that had? What was the production like, and how much of an impact did that have on World War II?
Well, Sam, you have to look at the precursor to World War II, which was World War I. Mm-hmm. And at that time, it sounds strange, but Bethlehem Steel at that time was selling weapons of mass destruction to both sides before 1914. And of course, the assassination of the Archduke in Sarajevo in 1914 ended up changing the sides for World War I. So then, fast forward to the late 30s and early 40s, there was such a huge buildup in shipping, and Bethlehem promised a ship a day out of their shipyards. And they were laying a keel to a ship in 4 days, which was unheard of. I mean, you're talking so many thousands of people working. And in the war years, in the Bethlehem plant alone, we had 30,000 plus workers working 3 shifts a day, 24/7 at the Bethlehem plant.
Was the shipyard separate then?
Yes, yeah. So as Bruce mentioned before, we were a landlocked plant, so we weren't building the ships right here out of Bethlehem. But Bethlehem Steel Corporation owned a number of plants, one of which was Sparrows Point down in Maryland. That was right alongside the ocean front, a perfect place to start building ships. But as Bruce mentioned, there's a lot more than just the ships being built. I think the last numbers I had remembered was about 45% of artillery cannons and about 65% of artillery shells were being produced by Bethlehem Steel.
So Bethlehem is essentially the HQ, the headquarters for, but there's a lot of different plants that are elsewhere in the country as well.
Yeah, they had a lot of different plants, kind of mostly along the East Coast. But depending on the location, you could work on different things, once again, like ships. But Bethlehem plant here in Bethlehem was the largest of the main plant, about 4.5 miles long. So they were producing a lot of stuff here in Bethlehem.
And it said, Sam, that the other plants of Bethlehem's fortune, Sparrows Point, Burns Harbor, they came from Bethlehem because all the design work, all of the machine work was done in Bethlehem, and the plants were built in those other locations from the ingenuity and the mind of the people in Bethlehem. So,
when you reflect back on Bethlehem Steel's long storied history, and when you think about, we talked about all these different buildings, New York City skyline, but the war effort, how would you describe or put into words the global impact that Bethlehem Steel had?
Pretty large. Definitely on a local level, but on a national level, we're contributing to the war effort. We're building the infrastructure of a lot of our important cities like New York. Just imagine New York without Bethlehem Steel. We mentioned a lot of things like the Golden Gate Bridge, also George Washington Bridge too. So if you want to connect New York and New Jersey, that's very important. I don't know if I can put a number to it, but it significantly helped. We'd like to say it helped build America.
Yeah. Well, Absolutely, like, in a very literal sense,
Yes.
Bethlehem built the United States. Yeah.
And you also have to look, Sam, at the fact that after the war, Germany was in ruins, Japan was in ruins, Italy was in ruins. They needed materials, they needed engineers, they needed all of the infrastructure redone. And a lot of that work and a lot of that steel even came from our own plant. Wow. So we helped to rebuild those nations after the war.
So outside the United States, you still see Bethlehem Steel throughout the rest of the world. It's not just American infrastructure that was built up by it.
Oh, it was absolutely global. Absolutely.
Wow. Like I said, immigrant parents come to the United States. They said, we never heard of Allentown. We know Bethlehem. And it's something that made its way into their elementary school textbooks, all the way in Taiwan. And so certainly a global impact. We're going to go to the break. When we come back, I want to talk about the local impact. You mentioned earlier 30,000 workers just here in the Bethlehem plant. I want to talk about what kind of impact that had on the economy locally. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Face the Issues is produced and recorded in the studios of Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Watch Lighthouse TV wherever you go. Available on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and Apple TV. You can view our in-house studio productions on demand, or watch what's on the station right now with our 24/7 live stream. Search Lighthouse TV online on your streaming device, or go to our website lighthousetv.org for more information. Lighthouse TV, positively different.
Welcome back to Face the Issues. Keith, Bruce, thank you again for joining us. Talking about Bethlehem Steel, we left off talking about its global impact. Bruce, something you said, it's not just, I mean, Keith, you started by saying this is the corporation that built America. I mean, it is, right? Bethlehem builds the United States, and Bruce, you added on, it's not just the United States, but you look at all of those countries after the war, the Marshall Plan, and all the rebuilding that needed to be done, and Bethlehem is just absolutely central to all of that development globally. I want to talk about its local impact. It is here in the Lehigh Valley where our studios are. It is something that everybody, I think, growing up around here knew of, but may not always understand the history or the impact that Bethlehem Steel has had. I was still raised in the era where Bethlehem Steel was still in business, but our students that are coming up today, certainly this is very much history for them. What was that impact? Let's start with the economy. What was the economic impact for this region because of Bethlehem Steel? Either of you.
Well, everybody worked at Bethlehem Steel. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you were in Bethlehem, you knew somebody or had a relative, a parent, a cousin, an uncle, whatever, that worked at Bethlehem Steel. In the 60s, the steel was booming 24/7, and there was so many people working there. I estimate probably 18 to 20,000 in that time. I started in '73, and at that time there were still 14,000 people working there. And if you didn't work at Bethlehem Steel, you might have worked for an ancillary agency or company that provided something to the steel. There were several lumber yards. Mm-hmm. They needed wood to build forms and to do scaffolding and planks and safety planks and whatnot. They needed that wood, so that came from some of these other places. They needed wire for electronics and electrical stuff. They needed concrete, so you got to figure the concrete industry in that as well. Yeah. And all these other industries came up because of Bethlehem Steel. So it wasn't just the 20,000 people that worked at the steel. There might have been 10, 15,000 people in other industries surrounding us that had to do with Bethlehem Steel. So Bethlehem Steel was the feeder to all these little industries and businesses in the area.
This area is known, also Lehigh Valley, is, to your point, is known for concrete as well. Northampton, I mean, their high school nickname is the Concrete Kids. Whitehall was in the Copley area, well known for their concrete industry. Did these industries come or develop in the Lehigh Valley in large part because of Bethlehem Steel and the need for it? Or, I mean, certainly they were bolstered by Bethlehem Steel, but were they was a large part of them being here and developing to support the steel industry?
I would say partially so, but also this area is very heavy in limestone, which is one of the raw materials in making cement. And so Portland cement was developed in this area. And of course, when you have something that's that big of a building material, of course, everybody's going to use it. And then, of course, the steel is going to, oh, hey, we need that for our foundations, and we need that for building this building, or we need that for a footer, a foundation, and so that probably plays very, very big on the cement industry.
Yeah, when you have a number of industries in one place, it tends to invite other industries to come in. So even if you're going back farther to the 1800s with the canal system going on the Delaware and Lehigh River, that's bringing in a lot of industries, and then it kind of just grows from there.
Wow. Did the canal system have a impact or relationship with Bethlehem Steel?
Not too much at that time. Bethlehem Steel, before Bethlehem Steel, you're talking about Bethlehem Iron.
Right.
A lot of what they were kind of starting with was like the railroad. You may have heard of Asa Packer, his connection with the railroad in the area, and working with Bethlehem Iron. And then, of course, also founding Lehigh University.
Right.
So with the railroad being this newer transportation route, it kind of gets rid of the older use of the canal, but even in the early days, industry was always huge in Bethlehem. Even with the founding of the city in 6 years, about 35 different crafts, trades, and industries in Bethlehem.
One of the other ones that we talk about is this is silk, and this idea that Bethlehem was a huge part of the silk industry in two different eras. But a lot of that was also fueled by Bethlehem Steel. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you so a lot of the people working at Bethlehem Steel, they have a lot of families here, and if you have, as I said before, one industry, you have a lot of industries coming in. In the early period, the Moravians were working with silk, but that's kind of unconnected to our later period. But a lot of mills started developing at that time, and in a lot of cases, a lot of wives, even children of families where their husbands might be working at Bethlehem Steel, they are going to be working at the silk mills. So families are kind of connected by the fact that they're all working in the industries here in the valley.
My understanding is also during the war, a lot of women or spouses of the men who worked at Bethlehem Steel ended up going to Bethlehem Steel to continue the effort as their husbands or spouses went off to war. So Bethlehem Steel, I mean, obviously, if you're producing a ship a day, to Bruce's point earlier, Bethlehem Steel is still running straight through the war, and a lot of that was powered by women.
Yeah, you have more demand than ever before, and some of your workers might be fighting overseas. So as a result, you need as many workers as you can get, and women come in and work in all different areas of the plant.
Even when, in my tenure at the steel, there were still women working in the plant. And it's sometimes not a pleasant place to work.
Sure.
You know, you have dirt, grease, heat, cold. The hazards are so many. It's, you know, you can't even count them all. So, not really one of the nicest places to work for women or men,
or anyone,
you know, or anyone really. You think about it, but yeah, that's it fueled a lot of people to have jobs and good jobs, and you know, to send their kids to college and to have a good life in a very nice place. So,
Bruce, I want to ask you. You worked at Bethlehem Steel for quite a long time. You just talked about the conditions. What was it like? What was a day like in your life as a Bethlehem Steel employee?
Well, each day was different, Sam. I have to tell you that. We would come in the morning, and there would be a set of numbers on the bulletin board, and I was with the service division. I was with the riggers. So we did plant maintenance, construction, demolition, alterations, a lot of repair work, because the plant was old. You know, in the 60s, the plant was built, you know, at the turn of the century. So in the 60s and 70s and 80s, everything's old. And you would, your number would be on a list, and that they would tell you where you're going to go for the day, and you'd get your tools, and you'd leave the tool room, and you'd take your lunch with you, and then you wouldn't come back until the end of the day when it's time to shower and go home. And you would get 10 minutes for break and 20 minutes for lunch.
Wow.
And It's not like it was when the old timers were working, because there was no union, and the old timers used to tell us, when we were working in this area, the boss would come along, and if you had a sandwich, you'd have to hide behind a column and eat it. And a boss would come along and slap the sandwich out of your hand and say, "I'm not paying you to eat. You get back to work right now." They didn't have a lunch break. They didn't have a coffee break. They didn't have a place to wash up. There was no clean room, no clean house. You went in your work clothes, and you came home in your work clothes.
Wow.
And that was it.
Wow.
And sometimes, the work is so greasy and dirty and grimy, and pollution and extreme conditions, heat, cold, whatnot. So when the union came in, that made it so much better, but yet still, it was dangerous and dirty and not a very happy place to work.
Sure. Bethlehem Steel declines, ends up closing I think officially in the early 2000s, but by the 90s, the plant has largely closed. What triggered that? And more importantly, what was that impact like? We talked about the economy in the valley really booming and all these other industries here supporting each other, Bethlehem Steel being the linchpin of a lot of that. So what happens as Bethlehem Steel declines and eventually closes?
Well, Sam, you have to look at a lot of different things. Number one, landlocked plant. Number two, takes 7 tons of material to make 1 ton of steel. It's got to be brought in. Logistically, you have to look at that. Energy costs are soaring. Labor costs are soaring. If one division of the plant starts going down, you still have the maintenance that you have to pay for. So as these little things are happening, you're losing a department, but you still have to keep the maintenance. You're losing another department, and it's like, oh, we're not making any money here. We have to close that down. We're landlocked. We're in a tight economy. There are mini mills now happening. There are foreign companies coming in and trying to take our market share. And if you look at all of these things put together, that's the decline of the Bethlehem Steel. Not just one thing, all of them.
Put together,
yeah. I think luckily, though, they kind of knew that this was going to be the case. They kind of saw the writing on the wall in a way and noticed that this was going to be a problem. So a lot of Lehigh Valley businessmen kind of planned ahead and started to diversify additional industries in the area. So when Bethlehem Steel did close down, of course it caused a recession in the area, but it could have been a lot worse. I mean, you think of towns today that are built around a single industry.
Sure.
When that closes down, they're in huge trouble. But Bethlehem, thankfully, wasn't hit that hard because they kind of were able to plan ahead a little bit, which is great.
And you do see that in so many parts, even just Western Pennsylvania, Oil City, Pennsylvania, other areas where one industry leaves and it looks like a ghost town. I mean, even to this day, certainly you don't see that in Bethlehem. So, gentlemen, thank you. We're going to go to break. When we come back, we want to talk a little bit about Bethlehem Steel and pop culture and just your feelings about that. So don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Issues. Gentlemen, thank you again for just sharing this wealth of history with us. Bethlehem Steel as a corporation may be closed, but it certainly lives on in pop culture. I think perhaps the most famous is actually a reference to Allentown in the famous Billy Joel song, when he's actually talking about Bethlehem and says it's too hard to rhyme Bethlehem with anything, and so he calls it Allentown. But there's the soccer team Bethlehem Steel FC, and there's 2 iterations of that. The Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs are really named for with their connection with Bethlehem Steel and pig iron. The idea, I mean, we had multiple, there's a indie rock band called Bethlehem Steel, different songs named Bethlehem Steel. And when the Transformers movie was shot here, in trying to get the steel imagery of China. When you look at just what Bethlehem Steel, what it is now, and you look at the steel stacks and so forth, but also just how it's remembered in pop culture, good, bad, how do you hope Bethlehem Steel is remembered?
Well, Sam, that's a tough one. I mean, it's something that there is so much interest in it now. You know, I often think that if there would have been that much interest in it 30 or 40 years ago, that the plant might still be here. So that's, you know, that's kind of with a little bit of distaste, but its time was done. And to put that kind of investment back into an aging plant that's landlocked, that has all of these conditions that have to be overcome to make a profit, well, you could see what happened. As far as how it's remembered, somebody commented to me, and we were up on the trestle when they had just finished the rebuild of the trestle, and they said, "Oh, this is lovely. This is really nice. What do you think of this?" And I was with Richie Check, one of the old-time steel workers. That was one of my mentors when I was in the plant. And Richie said, "Well, it didn't look like this when we were working here." And that's kind of the thought. It was dirty, it was hot, it was dangerous, it was not a place you'd want to spend time. But now it is a destination. It is a place where you can go and enjoy your family and your friends and the atmosphere of what Bethlehem Steel might have been like. But unless you were part of it, or unless you're a history aficionado, you're really not going to understand fully, how important Bethlehem was to this area. So,
I mean, I think once again, Bethlehem Steel has a huge impact on our community. Think of things like Music Fest, just being able to listen to music and have the blast furnaces as a background. That's really cool. It's still kind of a part of our local culture, even though it's been closed down. I mean, we get hundreds of school students each year that come in and tour and learn more about Bethlehem Steel and learn. I mean, many of the students even have their own family members who work there. So.
Yeah, and so in so many ways, to your point, something different, something new, but you guys are also doing the work of preserving the real history of it. And so, Keith, Bruce, thank you for joining us, for sharing that piece of history with us and our viewers. I deeply appreciate it.
Well, Sam, it's been our pleasure, and thank you so much for inviting us here.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is our show for this evening. I want to thank both Bruce and Keith for joining us, for their work preserving history every day. And you can learn more about Bethlehem Steel by checking out Historic Bethlehem Museum and Sites. My name is Sam Chen. On behalf of all of us here at Face the Issues, thank you and good night.